Not so long ago, if you wanted something incredibly fast and capable that could carry the whole family and make your dog car sick, you had to buy a fast wagon, like an Audi RS6 Avant or a BMW M5 Touring. But it's 2021. People don't want fast wagons. They want fast SUVs. Today, the fast SUV isn't just a thing, it's now become so popular that we have different flavours, like these two. On the one hand, we have the Audi RSQ8, which is basically a less shouty Lamborghini Urus, and it is total overkill. 441 kilowatts, 800 Newton meters, and even though it weighs 2.3 tons, Audi says this will go from 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. Then we have the Porsche Cayenne GTS. It has less power and is almost a second slower to 100. But in the world of Porsche, the GTS badge is basically a synonym for driver focused. So this thing is all about how it goes around corners. So what we have here is power versus poise, Porsche versus Audi. And the question is, what flavour of $200,000 super SUV is best? Let's find out. Oh, and if you haven't already, please hit subscribe to the Motor YouTube channel. Now, before we start hurtling 5 tons of lunatic SUVs around some corners, let's walk through the tech highlights of each car because they are packing some serious engineering. And in the game of top trumps, it's the Audi that takes the first victory because lurking underneath this huge bonnet, or hood if you're in America, is a 4-litre twin-turbo V8 supplemented by a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Total outputs are 441 kilowatts and 800 Newton meters, and that's a whopping 103 kilowatts and 180 Newton meters more than you get in the Porsche. Then there's the way that it looks. Now, there's no getting around the fact that it is more subdued than a Lamborghini Urus, but I kind of like that. It's got a bit of a sleeper vibe to it, and it does still cut a really imposing figure. And the details are really cool as well, including these matrix LED headlights, which, along with the taillights, win the award for the coolest turn-on, turn-off sequence currently on sale. Now, remember that tyre ad which says your car is only connected to the road by 4 handprints? Yeah, well, that logic kind of goes out of the window with the Audi RSQ8 because the wheels and tyres on this thing are absolutely enormous. Standard fitment is 22 inches, but this car has the no-cost option 23-inch wheels, and lurking behind them are some of the largest brakes fitted to any production car. This car has the standard steel stoppers, and they measure 420 millimeters, and they're clamped by 10-piston brake calipers. But if you option the carbon ceramics, the brake discs go out to 440 millimeters. I'd hate to think how much a replacement tyre or replacement brake disc is going to cost you. Lurking underneath is air suspension and 4-wheel steering, plus of course, quattro all-wheel drive, which can send up to 85% of the drive to the rear axle. And at the back, you get a boot that's not only large enough to swallow the family Labrador at 605 litres, but the boot is actually 40 litres larger than you get from an Audi RS6. Now, you might think that the Porsche is hopelessly outgunned in this fight, but nah, actually, you're right, it is. It also has a 4-litre twin-turbo V8, but it only has 339 kilowatts and 620 Newton meters. Huge outputs, but in this company, yeah, well, but the big news is it actually has a V8 in the first place. The last Cayenne GTS ditched the V8 in favour of a twin-turbo V6, but for this generation, the Bent 8 is back. GTS models sit 20 millimeters lower than regular Cayennes, and like the Audi, you get air suspension, but there's no 4-wheel steering. And in the wheel and brake comparison, the Porsche comes off second best with 21-inch wheels and 390 millimeter front brake discs clamped by 6-piston calipers. But it is a whisker lighter than the RSQ8, and you also get a locking rear differential and a sports exhaust, which sounds like an SUV that wants to be driven, not cooped up in the city. So let's get out of here. So what is an Audi RSQ8 like to pedal quickly? Well, it's pretty unbelievable, actually. Nothing this big or this heavy or this tall has a right to be this quick or to go around corners quite like this. Honestly, on these roads, I think it's just as quick and just as involving as an Audi RS6. And I did not think I'd be saying that. The first thing you notice is the steering, which is something that Audi doesn't always get right, but in the RSQ8, it has. There's a decent amount of feel just off center, and you also have a good connection to the front axle, which gives you the confidence you need when you start hurling around something that weighs almost 2.5 tons. And the way that this thing grips is just insane. It might be the size of an elephant, but this car has the agility of a gazelle. Turn-in is surprisingly sharp, and when you have the drive mode set to RS mode, the whole thing just stays so flat and hunkered down. Mostly that is the active anti-roll stabilization doing its thing. I don't want to say that it feels spooky because it doesn't, but you do get the sense that there are some really clever systems working really hard to keep this car on the road. Push really hard and you will eventually unearth some understeer. But you have to be driving like such a wally to get to that point. As for speed, well, 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds sounds really impressive, but let's see what this thing achieves when we run the numbers ourselves. We have our trusty timing gear set up on the windscreen. We've got an empty, straight rural road. Let's give launch control a go, see what it does. Ooh. This thing is seriously rapid. And that is 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds. So a whisker off the official claim, but seriously impressive for a 2.3 ton SUV. So it's incredibly quick in a straight line, but I just wish it sounded a bit better. It does have a nice V8 burble, but given how unhinged the rest of the car is, I was kind of expecting a V8 soundtrack to match, but it's just a little bit understated for my liking. As for what it's like inside, well, you get Audi's familiar multi-screen, anti-button interior, and it is beautiful. Honestly, it's techie, it's modern, it's high-end. It feels like a really, really expensive stereo system, but I do have a few issues with how you actually use it. I'm not a big fan personally of haptic feedback, and it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet in here. Not just the screens, but also the black piano plastic that surrounds the center console. So if you're a neat freak like me, make sure you carry a microfiber cloth, otherwise you're gonna get a bit annoyed in here. And personally, I actually prefer the cabin in the Porsche. First impressions in the Cayenne Coupe GTS. This is what a V8 super SUV should sound like. It might be down in the power and torque stakes compared with the Audi, but when it comes to theatre, this car wins hands down. Just listen to it. It pops, it cracks, it's mean, it sounds like it's gurgling petrol. I absolutely love it. Second impressions in the Porsche, don't try to carry the same amount of speed into corners as you do in the Audi because you will probably have a really big moment. This Cayenne GTS doesn't have active anti-roll bars or four-wheel steering, and through corners like this one, you do notice it. There's a lot more body roll. Plus, this car is on Pirellis, not Continentals like you get in the Audi, and you do reach the limits of grip much earlier in the Porsche. That's not to say that this car isn't fun, because it really is. The connection you get through the steering and the way the Cayenne GTS corners once it's settled is really, really impressive. But that RSQ8 is in a different league when it comes to tracing a line through a corner. As for straight line pace, let's see how it compares 0 to 100 with the RSQ8. Oh, I can't get over how these things get off the line. And that is 0 to 100 k's an hour in 4.4 seconds. So actually a whisker faster than its official claim. So it is slower to 100 k's an hour, and on coarse chip roads like these ones, there's also a bit more NVH intrusion in the cabin of the Porsche. Plus, in the back seat, there's a smidge less room for rear seat passengers. But honestly, overall, I prefer the cabin ambience in the Cayenne over the RSQ8. So the Porsche sounds better and is cheaper, but it's also less potent in a straight line and doesn't corner as well as the Audi. Optioning active anti-roll bars on the Porsche for $7,000 would make this contest much closer, but as it stands, the Audi is the winner. The Porsche is probably all the super SUV you'd ever need, but do the people buying these SUVs really settle for all you ever need? The Audi is bigger, bolder, faster. It's just more, which in the super SUV segment is probably what matters most.